The neon lights of the Red Raven Motorcycle Club flickered like a dying heartbeat against the cold Kansas night. Rain had been falling for hours, turning the parking lot into a mirror of mud and chrome. When the door creaked open, every laugh, every clang of a beer bottle stopped. Laura Bennett stood in the doorway, soaked from head to toe, wearing blood-stained blue scrubs that looked more battlefield than hospital. Her right hand held a Glock 19, steady, trained, unapologetic. The sound of the slide being racked cut through the music like thunder in a church. "I'm here for my son," she said. The words weren't screamed. They were delivered calm, clear, and absolute, like a nurse pronouncing time of death. 18 men turned toward her, tattoos and leather catching the dim light. For a long moment, no one moved. At the end of the bar, Duke Harrigan, the club's president, 6'3", silver hair, and a scar down his jaw, rose slowly from his chair. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong place," he said, his voice carrying the kind of confidence that comes from years of never being challenged in your own house. "Hospitals are about 10 miles that way." The men around him roared with laughter, a sound too loud, too cruel, too sure of itself. Laura didn't blink. Her eyes scanned the room with a quiet calculation: exits, corners, weapons, threats, all processed in seconds with the mechanical precision of someone who had done it before. The smell of beer and engine oil mixed with the metallic tang of rain on steel. "Aiden Bennett," she continued, her tone clipped, professional, almost military. 19 years old. Last seen leaving this club 72 hours ago. The laughter faltered. A few heads turned toward Duke, but his face stayed stone cold. "Never heard of him," said Slim Navarro, the wiry treasurer, flipping through his phone as if the proof of innocence might appear on a screen. Laura's fingers stayed outside the trigger guard, her grip textbook perfect. "Then maybe you can explain why his motorcycle's outside," she said. "Blue Kawasaki, plate 3XR942, still warm when I checked it." The words hung in the smoky air. Bear Collins, the club's enforcer, a wall of muscle wrapped in denim, slammed his beer bottle down hard enough to make the bar rattle. "You need to leave before you get hurt, ma'am," he growled. Laura's voice didn't rise, but something in it shifted, something that made even Bear hesitate. "I've been hurt before," she said softly. Behind the bar, Rosa Delgado froze mid-reach, the phone half lifted toward her ear. In the corner, Doc Harris, a weathered man with a limp and a whiskey glass, leaned forward, studying the way Laura held herself. It wasn't desperation he saw, it was readiness. The kind of readiness soldiers carried home and never quite put down. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, a low warning that something larger was coming. Inside, the quiet stretched thin as wire. Laura took a single step forward, the barrel of her weapon angled toward the floor, her back now against the wall, tactical, controlled. "Where's my son?" she asked again, and this time her voice wasn't just a question, it was a promise. Rain whispered against the metal roof as the laughter died piece by piece, leaving only the sound of engines idling outside. Duke Harrigan's smirk faded into something colder. He'd seen plenty of desperate people walk into this bar, debt collectors, angry exes, small-town sheriffs looking to prove a point, but never someone like her. There was something in Laura Bennett's eyes that didn't belong to this world of beer and bravado. It was discipline. It was loss. "Lady, I'm giving you 10 seconds to walk out that door," Duke said, his hand brushing the butt of a pistol hidden beneath his leather vest. "Because the next time you raise that gun, someone's gonna get hurt." Laura didn't move. The smell of gasoline from her damp scrubs mixed with the cheap cologne of the men surrounding her. "You already hurt someone," she said quietly. "My son." The words cut deeper than any bullet. Bear Collins pushed off from the bar, his heavy boots echoing across the wooden floor. "I don't care who you think you are," he barked. "You're trespassing." Laura's eyes flicked toward him, reading his stance, his angle, his distance. In another life, she might have offered him advice about posture. Instead, she shifted her weight, barely perceptible, left foot anchored, right knee bent, center of gravity perfect. When Bear lunged, her reaction was instinct, not thought. A twist, a sidestep, a sharp motion, and his wrist was suddenly locked under her control. He grunted in pain, his beer bottle smashing to the floor. The Glock never wavered. The whole move took less than a heartbeat. "Don't," she said simply, letting him stumble back. Every man in the room froze. Rosa dropped the phone. Doc Harris's whiskey glass stopped halfway to his lips. He'd seen that kind of movement before years ago, under dust and gunfire halfway around the world. "You've got training," he muttered under his breath. "You're not just a nurse." Laura heard him, but her focus didn't break. "I don't want trouble," she said, scanning the faces that had turned from mocking to uncertain. "I want the truth." Duke forced a laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Truth? You don't walk into a biker club with a gun if you're looking for truth. You're looking for trouble, sweetheart." Laura tilted her head slightly. "Then maybe they're the same thing." A murmur rippled through the crowd, half respect, half unease. Doc Harris leaned forward in his chair, his voice rough but calm. "Ma'am, maybe you should put that thing down before somebody does something stupid." "Someone already did something stupid," Laura said, pulling a crumpled paper from her pocket. It was Aiden's work schedule, smeared with oil and blood. He was supposed to work a double shift. Never showed. "Last text I got was 11:15 Tuesday night. Mom, need help." She let that sink in, her eyes scanning for a flicker of recognition. She found it not in Duke, not in Bear, but in Slim Navarro, the thin man with prison tattoos and eyes that darted like a cornered animal. He tried to hide it by looking away, but Laura caught it. "You know something," she said, leveling her voice at him. Slim stammered. "Lady, I don't even know your kid." "Then why are your hands shaking?" The question landed like a blow. Duke turned sharply toward Slim. "You got something to say?" "Nothing, boss," Slim mumbled. But the room was already shifting. The confidence was gone, replaced by a nervous current that hummed under the fluorescent light. Doc Harris set his glass down carefully. "You said your name was Bennett?" he asked. "Yes," Laura replied. "Laura Bennett." The old biker nodded slowly, like he was testing the sound of it against memories he didn't want to revisit. "Where'd you serve?" The question hung in the air. Laura's eyes narrowed slightly. "Excuse me?" "That's not how a civilian handles herself," Doc said. "That's how someone trained for combat does." The silence that followed was electric. Even Duke hesitated, his hand moving slightly away from his gun. "You a cop?" he asked. Laura shook her head. "No, I'm a mother." "Then what the hell are you?" Bear demanded, flexing his sore wrist. "Someone who's done being ignored." Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time, like an omen. Rosa moved quietly toward the window and froze. Duke," she said softly, "you might want to see this." Every head turned as the sound of engines filled the air, not the deep growl of Harley-Davidsons, but the precise hum of government vehicles. Black SUVs, unmarked, headlights cutting through the rain, pulling up in formation. Duke's jaw clenched. "What the hell?" But before anyone could answer, Laura holstered her gun with the same practiced smoothness she'd drawn it. "They're here," she said quietly. "For you." The room erupted in confusion, chairs scraping, weapons drawn, curses flying. And for the first time that night, Laura Bennett smiled, not out of triumph, but out of relief. Because whatever happened next, the search for her son was about to end. The night exploded into motion. The door slammed open as cold air rushed in, carrying the heavy scent of rain and asphalt. Men in tactical vests poured through the entrance, their shouts precise, controlled. "Federal agents! Nobody move!" Red dots swept across leather jackets and beer bottles, slicing through the smoky air like streaks of blood. Laura didn't flinch. She stood where she was, calm amid the chaos, hands raised just enough to show she wasn't a threat. Duke Harrigan's face turned to stone, his hand frozen halfway to the pistol at his waist. For a man who'd ruled this room for 2 decades, the sudden loss of power hit like a punch to the gut. "What the hell is this?" he roared. "Who called them?" No one answered. Outside, the rhythmic thud of boots echoed as more agents took positions along the perimeter. Floodlights from the SUVs painted everything in harsh white. Rosa stood behind the bar, shaking, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Doc Harris hadn't moved, only watched the scene with tired, knowing eyes. "Duke," he said quietly, "I think you finally pissed off someone you shouldn't have." At the center of it all, Laura's gaze stayed steady. Agent Naomi Park stepped in next, small in stature but radiating an authority that filled the room. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, voice sharp, unhurried. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant for the arrest of Duke Harrigan and associated members of the Red Raven Motorcycle Club for racketeering, money laundering, and obstruction of justice." Her eyes landed on Laura just for a heartbeat, a flicker of recognition, or maybe surprise. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "you picked an interesting way to keep in touch." The words hit Duke like a hammer. He spun toward Laura, fury twisting his scarred face. "You called them?" Laura met his glare, unblinking. "I gave you a chance," she said softly. "You wasted it." Bear cursed under his breath, raising his shotgun, but 3 red dots instantly found his chest. "Drop it," an agent barked. He hesitated just long enough for Laura's voice to cut through the noise. "Don't be stupid, Bear. They'll shoot you before you blink." He froze, lowering the weapon, eyes darting between her and the FBI agents. Naomi Park signaled, and 2 agents moved forward to cuff Duke. He didn't resist, though his eyes never left Laura's face. "You think this makes you a hero?" he hissed. "No," she said, "it makes me a mother." The words stopped him cold. Outside, thunder cracked again, rolling over the plains as if the sky itself were exhaling. The agents began spreading out, securing the building, collecting evidence. Slim Navarro muttered curses under his breath until one agent yanked him to his feet. Rosa was crying quietly now, whispering prayers in Spanish. For a moment, it seemed like everything was over. But then Naomi Park turned back to Laura. "You shouldn't have come here alone," she said, lowering her voice. "You were supposed to wait for my call." Laura looked tired now, the adrenaline fading, the exhaustion of 3 sleepless days finally catching up. "Waiting isn't something I'm good at," she said. "You think any mother could sit still not knowing where her child is?" Naomi sighed. "He's safe, Laura. Aiden's safe. We've had him in protective custody since Wednesday night." The words hung in the air, almost too heavy to believe. "Safe?" Laura repeated, her voice cracking. "You're sure?" "Positive," Naomi said. "He called 911 after witnessing an exchange between Duke and Detective Alvarez. We picked him up before anyone else could." Laura's knees nearly gave out. For the first time since entering that bar, her weapon hand trembled not from fear, but from relief so deep it hurt. "He's alive," she whispered. Naomi nodded. "Very much alive. He's been asking for you." The room around them blurred voices, movement, chaos, all distant now. Doc Harris watched, eyes softening. "You did all this for your boy," he said quietly. "I would have done the same." Laura turned to him, the ghost of a smile crossing her face. "I know you would," but the relief didn't last. Naomi's tone shifted, quiet but firm. "There's something else we need to discuss, Mrs. Bennett." Laura straightened, sensing it wasn't good. "Your service record," Naomi said. "According to our database, you never served in the military." The words cut through the noise like a scalpel. Every agent, every biker, still conscious, turned to stare at her. Laura blinked, confusion flashing across her face, followed by something colder resignation. "That's impossible," she said slowly. "I was a flight medic, Air Force, Nellis, Bagram, Kandahar. None of that exists," Naomi interrupted. "No service number, no deployment record, nothing." Doc Harris's brow furrowed. "That's not right," he said, stepping closer. "I know that stance, that grip. That's a soldier's muscle memory." Laura's gaze dropped to the Glock still resting in her hand. Her voice was low when she spoke again. "Some records aren't meant to exist." Naomi's expression hardened. "Then I suggest you start explaining why a civilian nurse moves like a special operator." The air grew heavier, tighter, as every eye in the room fixed on her. Laura could feel the walls closing in, her secrets pressing at the edges of her silence. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the reflection of her own face in the rain-streaked window, tired, haunted, but unbroken. She holstered the weapon slowly, then turned toward the agent. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice calm again. "Then let's start with why I left the Air Force, and why the people who trained me made sure I'd never exist on paper." Naomi's eyes met hers, unflinching. "Go on." Laura exhaled once, steady and deliberate, the way she had before stepping into countless trauma rooms. "You asked who I am, Agent Park," she said. "The answer isn't simple, but if you really want to understand, we'll need to start in Kandahar." The air inside the Red Raven had gone still, like the moment before a storm hits. Even the agents had stopped moving, their attention locked on the woman in blood-streaked scrubs. Laura looked at the floor for a heartbeat, the memories coming in slow waves that smelled of dust, gun oil, and burning diesel. Kandahar, she began quietly. 2011. I was attached to a med-evac unit that flew into places so hot the maps didn't bother naming them. We called ourselves night owls because we only flew in darkness. If you're wondering why there's no record, it's because half the missions weren't supposed to happen. Her voice didn't waver. We went where the wounded were, no matter who they were. Soldiers, contractors, kids who got caught between lines. Sometimes we landed before the gunfire stopped. Sometimes it didn't stop at all. Doc Harris's face changed. He knew that tone. "You were Air Force PJ support," he said softly. Laura nodded. "I was a flight medic, cross-trained in field trauma and extraction. The badge wasn't for show. I earned it the hard way." She looked at Naomi Park. "My last mission was the one they tried to bury." Rain hammered the roof harder now, as if the sky wanted to drown her words. A team of SEALs was pinned down near a wadi outside Helmand. Command said extraction was impossible. We went anyway. We lifted 6 wounded men under RPG fire, took a hit at 50 feet. My pilot died on impact. I dragged 3 of them out through burning rotor blades. Her eyes had gone far away, seeing again the orange flash of explosions against a desert night. 2 survived. They told me later the unit lost the black box. I never believed that. I think it was destroyed to hide what went wrong. Naomi's voice softened. What did go wrong? Laura's hands tightened around the edge of a bar stool. Bad intel. Someone fed the coordinates to the enemy, the same network that's funding clubs like this one to launder cartel money. When I refused to sign the non-disclosure, my record disappeared. They called it an administrative error. I called it erasure. The agents exchanged glances. Even Duke, cuffed and silent, looked shaken. Doc Harris stepped forward, the years suddenly heavy in his shoulders. "Ma'am, nobody comes back from that kind of thing without scars." Laura gave a small, tired smile. "Some scars you can't see." She turned to Naomi again. "I didn't plan to dig any of this up. I just wanted a normal life. Emergency medicine, long hours. A son who didn't have to grow up watching his mother jump at every noise." She paused, the weight of it pressing down. "But when Aiden called that night, the voice I heard wasn't my boy's. It was the same fear I heard on open comms right before a mission went bad." Outside, another flash of lightning showed the SUVs parked in perfect formation. Inside, the tension twisted tighter. "So you think this cartel connection goes back to the same people who burned your record?" Naomi asked. "I don't think," Laura said. "I know. One of the SEALs we rescued, Lieutenant Andrew Pike, went dark after that mission. 2 years later, I started seeing his name pop up on shipping manifests tied to Midwest trucking routes. Guess what? The same routes your bureau flagged for narcotics distribution." Naomi's jaw tightened. She understood what that meant. "You're saying there's a pipeline from the old contracting world straight into domestic crime networks?" "Yes," Laura replied, "and Duke's Club is a spoke in that wheel. Aiden saw something he wasn't supposed to, and they tried to scare him quiet." She leaned on the bar, suddenly looking every bit as exhausted as she was brave. "You can arrest every man in this room, Agent Park, but unless you find who's paying them, another club will pop up in 6 months. Naomi nodded slowly, thinking. "You realize what you're describing is federal-level corruption." "Then start cleaning," Laura said. The simple defiance in her voice made even the agents straighten a little taller. For a moment, the room held a strange stillness. Not fear, but respect. Outside, thunder rolled away into distance, leaving only the steady drumming of rain. Doc Harris cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't know what kind of hell you've walked through, but if there's another fight coming, you won't be fighting it alone." Laura met his eyes. "You already fought enough wars, Doc." "Yeah," he said with a tired grin, "but this one's on home soil." Naomi exhaled, decision made. "Mrs. Bennett, I want you debriefed at headquarters. If half of what you're saying is true, we'll need you as a consultant." "Consultant?" Laura echoed. "You mean bait." "I mean a partner," Naomi said. "You've already proven you can handle yourself. Now let's use it to save more than just your son." Laura looked around the ruined clubhouse bottles on the floor, handcuffed men slumped against the wall, rainwater leaking through the roof. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. "All right," she said finally. "But first I need to see Aiden." Naomi gave a short nod. "You will. He's 2 hours out, safe house near Topeka." Laura breathed out. a slow, trembling release that seemed to drain every ounce of tension from her body. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to believe there might be a tomorrow. Rain still fell when they left the clubhouse, a steady whisper against the steel roofs and the hoods of black SUVs. The night smelled of wet asphalt and motor oil. Laura sat in the back seat of one of the vehicles, wrists free but hands clasped together in her lap, the tension of years still coiled in her shoulders. Agent Naomi Park sat across from her, silent at first, flipping through files on a tablet that glowed faintly blue in the darkness. The driver kept his eyes forward, the wipers thudding in rhythm with Laura's heartbeat. Through the window, Wichita rolled past neon signs half-lit, gas stations empty, the city asleep under a curtain of rain. Laura's reflection stared back at her, pale and hollow-eyed. She could still see the faint streak of blood across her sleeve, not her own, someone else's, someone from a different life. "You haven't asked where we're taking you," Naomi said finally, breaking the silence. "If I had to guess," Laura replied, "a field office or some underground facility where people with erased records are a little too convenient to ignore." Naomi almost smiled. "Topeka, temporary command center. You'll be debriefed there." "And my son?" Laura asked. "He's waiting for you," Naomi said. "You'll see him before dawn." For the first time, Laura's shoulders eased slightly, but the relief was short-lived. "You understand I can't leave you out of the report," Naomi continued. "You entered an active investigation, armed, without clearance. You put yourself and my team at risk." Laura turned her head toward the rain-streaked window. "You ever lost a child, Agent Park?" Naomi was quiet for a long time. "No," she said finally. "Then you wouldn't understand. The words weren't cruel, just weary. When they vanish, the rules stop mattering. You do what you have to do, even if it breaks you." Naomi studied her for a moment, seeing not the gun-wielding woman who'd walked into a biker bar, but a mother who hadn't slept in 3 days. "You remind me of someone," she said. "My mother. She was Army. Used to say courage isn't loud, it's just steady." Laura gave a faint nod. She was right. The SUV hit the interstate, rain hissing under the tires. Streetlights blurred into gold streaks through the glass. Naomi pulled up a file on her tablet and slid it across the seat. On the screen were names, bank accounts, encrypted transfers. "These are the shell companies tied to Duke Harrigan's operation," Naomi said. "Each one feeds into a logistics network based out of New Mexico, a network that also happens to trace back to a private military contractor dissolved in 2013. Laura's eyes narrowed. "Raven Shield Global," she said, almost to herself. Naomi looked up sharply. "You know it?" "I know some of the people who built it," Laura said. "They recruited out of special ops units that got decommissioned after the drawdowns. My unit patched their people more than once. They lost good men to greed." She rubbed her temple. "They used to move weapons and mercs overseas. Now they're moving narcotics through freight routes. Different cargo, same tactics." Naomi leaned back, the weight of realization settling in. "You think this is the same network?" "I think it never stopped," Laura replied. "They just changed uniforms." The SUV slowed as they approached the federal complex, low buildings ringed with fences and floodlights, the kind of place built to look invisible. Naomi turned off her tablet. "When we run your prints, the system's going to flag anomalies," she said. "Multiple deployments, conflicting IDs. Anything you want to tell me before that happens?" Laura gave a small, tired laugh. "They told me once that the best way to keep a secret is to bury it under truth. You'll find 5 different versions of me. The medic, the contractor, the instructor, the ghost. Pick the one that helps your report." Naomi studied her face, trying to read where the truth began and ended. "You don't make it easy to trust you." "Neither do you," Laura said. The SUV stopped. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Agents in black jackets waited near the gate. As Laura stepped out, her boots sank slightly into the mud. The smell of wet earth filled her lungs. "We'll talk after you see Aiden," Naomi said. "But Laura, whatever this is, it's bigger than one missing boy." "I know," Laura replied. "It always is." They walked through the security checkpoint and into the building. The lights inside were harsh, buzzing faintly. The hallways smelled of coffee and paper, and the faint ozone tang of electronics. Naomi led her to a small observation room separated by glass from another space. On the other side, Aiden sat on a couch, exhausted but alive, a blanket draped around his shoulders. When he saw her through the glass, his face lit up. Laura pressed her hand to the window, her throat closing. For a long moment, she couldn't move. Naomi opened the door quietly. "You have 5 minutes." Laura stepped in, her voice breaking. "Aiden." He stood, and she caught him in her arms before either of them could say another word. The smell of his hair, the warmth of him, proof that he was real, that he was still here. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "Never," he said. "I called 911 like you taught me. I knew you'd come." She held him tighter, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. For the first time in 72 hours, Laura Bennett let herself cry. Outside the glass, Naomi Park watched in silence. She had seen soldiers break down, agents crack under pressure, but this was something else. Not weakness, something stronger. The kind of love that could tear through fear and bureaucracy alike. The kind that changed things. Naomi turned away, picking up her phone. "This is Park," she said. "We're moving to Phase 2, and tell Washington Bennett's in." The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above, a sound that made Laura's temples throb. She sat at a steel table in a windowless room, hands folded, a paper cup of untouched coffee beside her. Across the glass wall, Agent Naomi Park spoke quietly with 2 men in suits. Their body language said everything: suspicion, calculation, and something else, respect. They didn't quite know how to show. One of them finally stepped inside. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, sliding into the seat opposite her. "I'm Special Agent Cole. You've caused quite a stir tonight." Laura gave a faint smile. "I tend to do that when people take my son." Cole didn't return the smile. "We've reviewed what you told Agent Park about Ravenshield Global. Problem is, that company was officially dissolved 12 years ago." "Officially," Laura repeated. "You think they disappeared because they went broke?" "No, they rebranded, just like the wars they fought in. Mercenaries without a battlefield need new clients. The cartel became theirs." She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady, eyes clear despite exhaustion. "You don't move narcotics across 3 states with biker gangs and truckers unless you've got military logistics behind it." Cole watched her carefully. "You have proof of this?" Laura gestured toward the files Naomi had brought from the raid. "Your own intel is the proof. Same shipment codes, same call signs, same trade routes used by Ravenshield's air cargo divisions a decade ago. Look at the manifests. You'll see my old unit's medevac coordinates embedded as dummy routing numbers." That got Cole's attention. "Those codes were declassified 2 years ago," he said slowly. "Only someone who served could recognize them." "Exactly," Laura said. "And whoever's running this now had access to our encrypted archives." She sat back, rubbing her eyes. "This isn't just about drugs or dirty money. It's about veterans who got left behind and found a way to survive wrong way, but still." Naomi entered quietly, a folder in her hand. "She's right," she said to Cole. "We ran the data. The same coordinates appear in 2 separate cases, one tied to Kansas trucking companies, another to a weapons bust outside Albuquerque. Both trace back to a shell corporation under the name RSG Logistics." Cole frowned. "RSG, Ravenshield Global. A ghost company," Naomi said. "And somebody's making sure it stays one." Laura took a breath. "There's more. The erasure of my records, it wasn't punishment. It was protection." Naomi looked at her sharply. "Protection from what?" "From who?" Laura corrected. "After the Hellman mission, someone on the inside tried to silence survivors. My commanding officer, Major Travis Lorne, disappeared 6 months later. My flight engineer died in a car crash that never made the news. When they couldn't find me, they buried my identity." Cole exchanged a glance with Naomi. "You're saying a network within the defense sector has been shielding these operations for years?" "I'm saying it's the same men who once signed our paychecks," Laura said, voice flat, "and they're still cashing theirs." The silence stretched. Naomi set the folder on the table and sat down beside her. "Why come forward now? You could have stayed invisible." Laura met her gaze. "Because they came for my son. They always go for the family first." The room seemed smaller suddenly. The weight of what she'd said filled the air. Naomi looked toward the one-way mirror, knowing every word was being recorded, transcribed, analyzed by people in suits who'd never set foot in a war zone. "What do you need from us?" she asked. "Time," Laura said, "and access. I can find the missing link between Ravenshield and the current operations." But I'll need to see my old mission files, the ones marked Kandahar 47B. Cole shook his head. Those are classified beyond our division. Then find someone higher up, Laura said simply. Because if we don't move fast, someone else will bury the trail. Naomi nodded slowly. I'll make the request. Cole stood. Until then, you stay here. Protective custody. Protective, Laura echoed, the corner of her mouth twitching. That what you call a locked room with no windows? It's safer than being outside, Cole said, and left. Naomi lingered. They're not wrong. We intercepted a communication 30 minutes ago, encrypted traffic out of El Paso, mentioning a missing medic from Kansas. They know you're alive. Laura's heartbeat spiked. So the erasure failed, she said. Or maybe it worked too well, Naomi replied. You became a ghost they can't control. Laura stood, restless, pacing the small space. Then we're both in their sights now. Naomi hesitated, then said quietly, You could walk away. Take your son, disappear again. We'll handle the rest. Laura turned to her. You think I could sleep knowing the same people who killed my team are still out there? That they'll come for someone else's kid next time? Her voice steadied, sharp as glass. No, you don't bury ghosts. You hunt them. Naomi didn't answer for a moment. Then she slid a card across the table. It was plain, white, embossed only with an insignia, an eagle clutching a shield. That's not Bureau, Laura said. No, Naomi admitted. Department of Defense Liaison Program. They handle off-record operations tied to national security breaches. If you're right, this goes far beyond the FBI. Laura looked at the card, tracing the outline of the eagle. And if I take this, then you're in deeper than you ever were, Naomi said. But you might finally get your answers. Laura looked at her reflection in the mirror-haunted eyes, streaked hair, a survivor's face. I stopped running a long time ago, she said. Tell your people I'll play ball. Naomi exhaled slowly, almost relieved. Then let's hope we're still alive when this story's finished. Dawn came softly over Topeka, brushing the horizon with pale gold. The rain had stopped sometime before sunrise, leaving the air clean and sharp, carrying that smell of wet earth that only the Midwest could hold. Inside the safe house, Laura sat at a kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, watching her son sleep on the couch. Aiden's hair was a mess, his face streaked with exhaustion and dried tears, but he was breathing steadily. She hadn't been able to stop looking at him since they'd reunited. Every few minutes she'd glance up just to make sure his chest was still rising. Naomi had left hours earlier, promising to pull strings for the Kandahar files. Laura doubted she'd sleep either. The agents stationed outside moved quietly, boots crunching on gravel, radios murmuring in code. Somewhere beyond that, the world was already turning again. Headlines spinning, crimes continuing, wars simmering. But for this brief window of dawn, there was peace. When Aiden stirred awake, he blinked at her and smiled the small, half-sheepish smile he'd worn since he was little. Mom, he said softly. You're really here, Laura smiled back, the kind that hurt her cheeks. Where else would I be? He sat up, rubbing his eyes. I thought I messed everything up. I saw something I shouldn't have. And then, stop, she said gently. You did exactly what I taught you to do. You called for help. That's what saved you. Aiden looked down at his hands. But it almost got you killed. Laura shook her head. No, it reminded me who I am. She reached across the table and took his hand, her calloused fingers dwarfing his. For years I tried to pretend that part of my life was over, that I could be just a nurse, just a mom. But there's no just in any of that. You can't unlearn what the world teaches you in fire. He studied her face quietly. You were a soldier. Still am, she said, just fighting different battles now. He hesitated, then asked, Are you going back? The question hit harder than she expected. Laura looked toward the window, where morning light traced the outline of the hills. I don't know, she said truthfully, but I might not have a choice. You always have a choice, Aiden said, his voice small but certain. Laura smiled faintly. You sound like your father when you say that. He would have wanted you safe, Aiden murmured. He would have wanted us both safe. For a moment, silence filled the room, soft, heavy, full of the things neither of them said. Then a knock broke the quiet. 2 sharp taps. Laura's instincts flared before her mind caught up. She moved to the door, glancing through the peephole. Outside stood a tall man in a gray suit, water still beating on his shoulders, a government badge clipped to his coat. She opened the door halfway. "Mrs. Bennett," he said. "Colonel Mason Whitaker, Department of Defense Liaison." His voice was low, precise, the tone of someone used to command. "Agent Park sent me." Laura stepped aside to let him in. "You people really don't waste time." Whitaker smiled without warmth. "Neither do you." He handed her an envelope marked confidential. Inside is an official invitation to consult for a special task force under defense oversight. Temporary, voluntary, but important. She set the envelope on the table without opening it. "You mean off the books? We prefer classified." He studied her a moment. "We know about Kandahar 47. B. We know what you saw and why the files were sealed. You weren't erased as punishment, Mrs. Bennett. You were protected because you carried evidence of an internal breach, one we never closed." Laura crossed her arms. "So now you want me to help you fix your mess?" "We want you to help us stop it from spreading," he said evenly. "Someone's moving old Ravenshield assets into domestic operations. If we don't intercept it, the next clubhouse won't be motorcycles, it'll be schools, hospitals, supply chains. And what happens to me if I say no?" "Then you and your son disappear again," Whitaker said. "New names, new lives, permanent relocation." He paused. "But you already know that's not in your nature." Laura gave a dry laugh. "You've read my file." "What little of it remains," he admitted. "But I've read enough to know you don't sit still while others get hurt." He nodded toward the envelope. "You have 48 hours to decide." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "For what it's worth, ma'am, it's good to have you back on the grid." When he was gone, Laura stared at the envelope for a long time. Aiden was watching her, his eyes wide with worry. "Mom," he said quietly, "don't go." She sat beside him, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not going anywhere tonight." "You mean yet?" he whispered. "You're thinking about it." "I'm thinking about what's right," she said. "Sometimes they're the same thing." She pulled him close again, feeling the warmth of his heartbeat against her chest. Outside, the sun had fully risen, painting the safe house in gold. For now, they were safe. But she could already hear the low hum of helicopters from the nearby base, the pulse of a world that never stopped asking for more from the people who'd already given everything. She didn't open the envelope, not yet. She just held it between her fingers, feeling the weight of choice inside. Somewhere in that thin paper was her past calling her home, and her son's future begging her to stay. For the first time in a long while, Laura Bennett didn't know which battle to fight next. The envelope sat untouched for hours, its edges curling slightly from the warmth of the morning sun spilling through the kitchen window. Laura stared at it the way a soldier stares at an unexploded shell, knowing that once she opened it, there would be no going back. Aiden had fallen asleep again on the couch, his face softened by exhaustion and the peace of temporary safety. She envied that kind of sleep. Hers had long since become a battlefield of dreams, dust, sirens, and names she could never forget. Finally, with a deep breath, she slid a finger under the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, heavy stock, no letterhead, just a typed message and a line at the bottom stamped in red, "Eyes only. Project Sentinel initial briefing. Subject: reactivation of former operative Night Owl 6, Laura Bennett. Objective: identify and neutralize domestic operations linked to defunct Ravenshield Global. Primary targets: Mason Whitaker, oversight. Lieutenant Andrew Pike, alias Razor, confirmed alive. Note: operation to be conducted under Joint Task Force authority. Non-disclosure applies retroactively. Beneath that was one final line, typed in smaller font, almost like an afterthought. Incident 47, B classified casualty. Captain Mark Bennett, confirmed compromised. The page trembled in her hands. Her husband's name Mark burned against the white like a wound reopened. She felt the air leave her lungs. For years, she had believed he'd died in a helicopter crash over Kandahar, collateral in a mission she wasn't part of but had heard through whispers. The death certificate had been sealed under military discretion, the official story neat and sanitized. But this, confirmed compromised. The words meant only one thing. He hadn't died in combat. He'd been silenced. Laura pressed a hand to her mouth to keep the sound in. The kitchen blurred, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, everything felt far away. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She read the line again, slower this time, forcing herself to see every letter. Captain Mark Bennett. He'd been her husband, her anchor. He was also the last pilot of the Night Owl unit before her transfer. She remembered that night the coded radio call, the static, the explosion that never made sense. The official report said engine failure. She had always known it was a lie. Aiden stirred at the sound of the paper crumpling. "Mom?" he mumbled, half awake. She wiped her face quickly, shoving the page back into the envelope. "It's nothing, baby. Go back to sleep." But her voice betrayed her, cracked and thin. He sat up. "It's not nothing." He saw the look in her eyes, the same look he'd seen once when a tornado siren wailed through their town and she'd grabbed him, whispering that everything would be okay even though she didn't believe it. "What happened?" he asked. Laura sat down, the envelope clutched in her hands. "It's about your father," she said quietly. "They lied to us, Aiden. He didn't die the way they said." He stared at her, confusion tightening into fear. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone killed him," she said, the words tasting like ash. "And I think it's connected to what's happening now to the same people I used to work for." The boy's breath hitched. "You're going after them, aren't you?" She couldn't answer. She didn't need to. He could see it in her eyes. The decision had already been made somewhere deep inside her, long before she opened the envelope. A knock came at the door again, softer this time. Laura rose and opened it to find Naomi Park standing there, dark circles under her eyes, a folder tucked beneath her arm. "You got the briefing," Naomi said, her tone unreadable. Laura nodded. "You knew," Naomi hesitated. "I suspected. When I saw the project name, I realized it wasn't just about Ravenshield. It's about what they buried with it." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I'm sorry, Laura. You weren't supposed to find out this way." "Find out what?" Laura's voice was low, dangerous. Naomi opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It was old, grainy, taken in a hangar somewhere overseas. A group of soldiers stood beside a helicopter, dust swirling around them. Mark Bennett was there, smiling faintly, a hand on another man's shoulder, Lieutenant Andrew Pike. Razor. Laura's breath caught. "He was alive," she whispered. "He still is," Naomi said. "And he's not working for us anymore." The words fell like a hammer. Laura sank into a chair. "Then this isn't just about justice," she said. "It's personal." Naomi nodded. "You know what happens when personal meets classified." "I do," Laura said. "People die quietly." For a moment they sat in silence, the ticking clock filling the space between them. Then Naomi leaned forward, voice low. "There's more. Whitaker's team is assembling a covert task force. They want you in it not just as a consultant but as field lead. They think you're the only one who can track Pike." Laura laughed bitterly. "Because I've done it before?" "No," Naomi said softly. "Because you're the only one who ever brought him home alive." The memories came rushing back: gunfire, smoke, the sound of Mark shouting coordinates, the desperate call for extraction, and Razor's voice crackling through the headset. "They're here, go without me." She had refused then, risking her life to pull him out. And now he was the ghost behind her husband's death. Laura stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. "If I do this," she said, "it's not for the government. It's not for redemption. It's for Mark." Naomi didn't argue. She just nodded once. "Then I'll make it happen." She hesitated at the door. "You should know, Whitaker's already briefing Washington. Once this starts, there's no turning back." Laura looked down at the envelope one last time, then folded it neatly and tucked it into her jacket. There never was. Outside, the first helicopters of the day rose from the nearby base, their rotors slicing the air. Aiden stood in the doorway watching her. "You're leaving, aren't you?" he asked. Laura turned to him, forcing a calm smile. "Not yet, but soon." She brushed a hand over his cheek. "I need to make sure what happened to your dad never happens again." He nodded slowly, eyes shining with something between fear and pride. "Then promise you'll come back." She swallowed hard. "I'll do everything I can." As the door closed behind Naomi and the sound of engines faded into the morning, Laura Bennett finally felt the war she'd tried to escape begin again, not in the deserts of Kandahar, but in the heart of her own country. And this time she wasn't fighting to survive. She was fighting to finish what had started 13 years ago. The air inside Fort Riley's underground annex was different, colder, drier, and filled with the hum of machines that never slept. Laura Bennett followed Colonel Whitaker down a narrow corridor lined with steel doors and retinal scanners. Her boots echoed against the concrete floor, the sound swallowed by the low drone of generators. She hadn't walked halls like this in nearly a decade, but her body remembered how to move, how to breathe, how to brace for what was coming. At the end of the hallway, Whitaker paused before a reinforced door marked Project Sentinel. He pressed his badge to the reader, and the lock disengaged with a mechanical click. Inside, the room opened up into a war room, maps projected on glass walls, satellite feeds flickering in real time, a dozen analysts murmuring into headsets. A huge screen displayed an image of Lieutenant Andrew Pike, the same face from the old photograph Naomi had shown her, only older, harder, and colder. "Welcome back to the grid, Night Owl 6, Whitaker said quietly. Laura stood still, her eyes sweeping the room. On one side, a row of desks bore patches of different branches, the Army, Air Force, Bureau, and something she didn't recognize. In the far corner stood Naomi Park, already out of her blazer, sleeves rolled up, scanning through data streams. She gave a small nod of acknowledgement, the kind you gave to someone who'd crossed a line there was no returning from. Whitaker gestured to a digital map. Pike resurfaced 6 months ago under the alias Razor Cane. He's been coordinating shipments along the I-35 corridor, armaments, cash, and narcotics routed through trucking companies and biker clubs. Our intel suggests he's building a private network of veterans and contractors loyal to him. They call themselves Iron Rain. Laura's jaw tightened. He's recruiting ghosts. Exactly, Whitaker said. Men and women erased from records, written off by their country. People who'll follow orders without asking where they came from. He tapped the screen again. Pike's next move is a convoy leaving New Mexico in 48 hours. He's smuggling something big, something worth the risk of exposure. Naomi joined them, holding a tablet. We intercepted encrypted chatter from one of his lieutenants. They mentioned a package linked to Kandahar 47 Bravo. That's your old mission, Laura. The words chilled her. He's reopening the file, she murmured, or finishing what he started. Whitaker nodded grimly. That's why you're here. We need someone who understands how he thinks. Laura looked at the image again. Pike's eyes stared back at her, cold and calculating. Once, she'd trusted those eyes. Once, her husband had too. Now they were the eyes of the man who had destroyed them both. I'll do it, she said quietly. But I want one thing in writing if I bring him in. I see the Kandahar files, all of them, unredacted. Whitaker hesitated, then nodded. Done. He led her to a smaller chamber off the main room. Inside was a locker marked with her old call sign. When she opened it, the smell of oil and canvas hit her like a memory. Inside lay a flight medic's vest, reissued but familiar, her old insignia stitched carefully onto the shoulder. Beneath it sat a sidearm, matte black, engraved with a small emblem, a night owl in flight. Naomi leaned against the doorway. Somebody in logistics has a sense of poetry, she said softly. Laura ran her thumb over the engraving. This belonged to my husband, she said. He used to say the owl only hunts when it must. Naomi nodded. Then let's make sure it hunts well. Over the next hours, Laura was reintroduced to a rhythm she thought she'd buried. Mission briefings, secure comm checks, mock operations inside a simulation bay where the floor shifted to mimic terrain. Her movements came back like instinct, each breath measured, each step precise. But beneath the surface, something else churned a fire that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with vengeance. Later that night, Whitaker convened the team in the war room. Operation Sentinel will deploy in 3 phases, he said. Phase 1, infiltration and reconnaissance along the New Mexico border. Phase 2, extraction of the target asset, Razor Cane. Phase 3, secure evidence linking Iron Rain to Ravenshield. Mrs. Bennett, you'll lead Phase 1 with Agent Park. Laura's eyes flicked toward Naomi, who gave a quick nod. We leave tonight? She asked. 0200 hours, Whitaker confirmed. You'll have a full tactical team and aerial support on standby. He looked at her with something that almost resembled respect. This isn't a vendetta, Bennett. It's containment. Remember that. Laura's expression didn't change. Containment ends when he's in cuffs. As the briefing ended, she walked down the dim corridor toward the prep bay. Through a small window, she saw soldiers gearing up, checking weapons, loading supplies, running silent drills. A young technician stopped her near the armory. Ma'am, he said, handing her a small device. Your comms unit, preloaded call sign Bravo 7. Laura clipped it to her vest. The number echoed in her mind, the same one she'd used in Afghanistan. It felt like fate playing a cruel joke. Naomi appeared beside her holding 2 helmets. Ready? Laura took hers. I've been ready for 13 years. They boarded the transport van in silence, engines idling low. Outside, the night stretched wide and endless over the Kansas plains. As the convoy pulled away, Laura looked out the window one last time toward the north, the direction of the safe house where Aiden slept. She pictured him in the doorway, eyes bright with worry, asking her to come back. "I'll come home," she whispered under her breath. "I promise." Naomi glanced over. "What's that?" "Nothing," Laura said. "Just a reminder." The road ahead disappeared into darkness, the kind she knew too well. But this time, she wasn't running from ghosts. She was hunting them. And somewhere out there, in the shadow of the desert and the silence of unfinished wars, Andrew Pike Razor Kane was waiting. The desert stretched out before them, endless and silent, painted in shades of rust and ash beneath the fading light. The convoy had stopped 20 miles outside Santa Rosa, where the highway gave way to an abandoned airstrip, cracked asphalt, rusted hangars, the ghosts of old wars still clinging to the wind. Laura stepped out of the armored van, her boots sinking into the dry sand. The air smelled of dust and electricity, the calm before a storm. Drones circled high above, their distant hum almost soothing. Naomi Park moved beside her, scanning the perimeter through binoculars. "Thermal shows movement inside the main hangar," she said. "At least 6 signatures. One of them matches Pike's profile." Laura nodded once. "We ended here." The tactical team fanned out. Shadows against the dying Sunday, Laura led the approach, her heart steady, her weapon low but ready. When they breached the hangar, the first thing she noticed was the sound, the hollow clang of metal, the echo of her own breathing. Rows of crates lined the walls, stenciled with the old Ravenshield insignia. And there, standing near the center beneath a single flickering light, was Andrew Pike. He looked older, leaner, but his eyes were the same cold, blue, unblinking. "You took your time," he said. Laura kept her distance. "You've been busy." He smiled faintly. "You always were the persistent one. I told Mark you'd find the truth eventually." Her chest tightened. "Don't say his name." "Why not?" Pike asked, his tone maddeningly casual. "He was my brother in arms, until he realized what the mission really was." "What did you do to him?" "I gave him a choice," Pike said. "He made the wrong one." The words hit harder than any bullet. Laura's voice dropped to a whisper. "You killed him." "I did what had to be done," Pike replied. He was going to expose everything, the contractors, the deals, the real reason we were sent into Kandahar 47 Bravo. "We weren't rescuing anyone, Laura. We were retrieving something. And your husband didn't want to play along." Laura's grip tightened on her weapon. "You call that survival. I call it betrayal." Pike took a step closer, hands open, unarmed but dangerous in every way that mattered. "You don't get it. We built this world, and then they erased us. Ravenshield, Iron Rain, whatever you call it. It's the only family left for people like us." Laura shook her head. "Family doesn't kill family." Before he could answer, a voice crackled in her earpiece, Naomi's. "Target armed, secondary heat signature behind him." Laura didn't hesitate. "On my mark." She took one slow breath, then whispered, "Mark." Gunfire tore through the silence. Pike dove behind a crate, drawing his pistol as agents swarmed the hangar. Dust and echoes filled the air. Laura moved with a precision born of instinct, every motion fluid, deliberate. She caught sight of Pike darting toward the side exit and followed. Outside, the night had deepened, the horizon burning with lightning from a distant storm. He turned, firing wildly. The first shot grazed her arm, the second shattered a crate beside her. She returned fire-controlled bursts, forcing him back toward the fence line. When she finally cornered him, he stood silhouetted against the storm, chest heaving, weapon empty. "Do it," he said, voice ragged. "You've wanted this since Kandahar." Laura raised her pistol, the barrel steady. For a moment, she saw not the killer, but the soldier she once saved, the man her husband had called brother. The wind howled around them, carrying the smell of rain. "No," she said softly. "That's what you do. That's not who I am anymore." She lowered the gun. In that instant, Pike lunged, but Naomi's shot rang out first. He fell, eyes wide in shock, the storm breaking overhead. Rain poured down, washing the dust and blood into the earth. Laura stood still for a long time, letting the water soak through her clothes. Naomi approached slowly, lowering her weapon. "It's over," she said. Laura shook her head. "No, it's just beginning." By dawn, the site was secured, the evidence catalogued. Ravenshield's final secrets would finally see daylight. As Laura stepped toward the transport, Whitaker handed her a sealed envelope. "Your clearance is reinstated. The department wants you on permanent assignment. Family Protection Division." Laura glanced at the sunrise bleeding over the horizon. "And if I say no?" Whitaker smiled faintly. "Then a black SUV will still be outside your house Monday morning. Some calls don't go unanswered." She almost laughed. "You people and your timing." Later, back in Wichita, the world felt quieter. Aiden waited on the porch, the morning light turning his face gold. When she pulled him into her arms, he whispered, "Is it really over?" Laura looked out at the empty road, where a single black SUV waited at a distance, engine idling. She smiled softly. For now, she kissed her son's forehead and turned toward the horizon, where the sky was opening wide and bright. Sometimes, she thought, freedom isn't about escaping the fight. It's about knowing which battles are worth returning for. And when her phone buzzed a moment later with a message that read, "New assignment, children at risk, coordinates attached," Laura Bennett didn't hesitate. She simply typed back, "En route." Then she walked toward the waiting dawn, toward the work that never truly ends, and the quiet courage that never fades.